But when you have career criminals, okay, who have been in and out of prison since they were teenagers, right, with a slap on the wrist, and it's just a revolving door over and over again, and their history has shown that this is who they are and this is what they're going to do, and no matter how lenient, how many chances you give them, they were still going to come back and do the same thing. Those are people that are menaces to society.
You're listening to Code Red with Secure America Now, the largest national security grassroots army.
In a recent national survey, over 60% of Americans said that crime is getting worse. In the last elections in 2022, crime was a major issue across the country. The breakdown in the rule of law continues. People are assaulted on the streets and witness crimes committed in stores while they are shopping. Our guest today is Madeline Brame. Madeline is a principal in a victim rights organization. She has spoken up against the rampant crime. Her family has been affected by crime. Her son was killed on the streets of New York. And Madeline actually, to me, is a role model. She is not going to sit back and take this type of chaos in our society. She is working to make change. And in last year's surprise election in New York State, she interjected herself and her organization into making crime, quite frankly, the number one issue in that election. I also want to mention, before I turn this over to Madeline, that she has a GoFundMe page. It is called Victims' Rights Advocate. And if you want to help her organization financially, that's the place to go. Go to GoFundMe.com, look up Victim Rights Advocate. So, Madeline, welcome to the Code Red podcast.
Hello.
And I want you to talk about crime to begin with, in the context of last year's elections, both in New York and across the country. Can you share with us why you felt it important to interject yourself and your organization into the political process?
Good morning, Alan, and thank you so much for having me. Greetings from New York City. New York City, within the past, I would say 4 years, has been on a continuous downward spiral. They instituted these new laws. You got bail reform, you got raise the age, you have elder parole, and less is more. And they also have another one that is, it's on the table now to be passed into law. Pretty much decriminalizing crime. We're criminalizing law-abiding citizens, innocent people, babies in strollers, senior citizens walking across the street, getting shot in the head with bullets. A nurse leaving Mount Sinai Hospital after a night shift, walking down the subway steps and being beaten in the head with a hammer. We have people like Michelle Go being pushed in front of a subway and her body being shredded to pieces by people who were recently released from the penitentiary under these new policies that have been nothing but a complete disaster, and they have been nothing but a runaway train that's crashing right into especially Black and brown communities. Now, these policies are disguised to make it seem like the legislature, that Albany, that lawmakers, that elected officials care about poor Black people or poor brown people. But in all actuality, the very people that it's supposed to be helping is hurting the most. When you talk about decriminalizing crime or decriminalizing, what are they calling it? Decriminalizing criminals. You are in fact criminalizing innocent, law-abiding, tax-paying people, because you're releasing these people right back into the same communities where they initially committed their crime, right? With no job, no education, no housing, no money. Criminals commit crime. Okay, that's what they do. Killers kill, rapists rape. Okay, abusers abuse, thieves steal. Right, and that's what they do. They have a lifelong history of this. This is their lifestyle. This is their culture. This is what they do. That's why there's something called prison. That's why there's something called a jail cell to put them in to protect society from those type of people. Now, don't get me wrong. There are some people who fall into criminal behavior, sometimes through no fault of their own. They're caught up at the wrong place at the wrong time. They got sucked into things because they did a robbery or sold drugs to take care of their family or what have you. There are murders that happen in self-defense, different things. But when you have career criminals, okay, who have been in and out of prison since they were teenagers, right, with a slap on the wrist, and it's just a revolving door over and over again, and their history has shown that this is who they are and this is what they're going to do, and no matter how lenient, how many chances you give them, they were still going to come back and do the same thing. Those are people that are menaces to society and don't need to be out amongst the public, amongst innocent people, causing wreaking havoc and hurting innocent people. Now, I just want to add that this is not nothing new. All right, this has been going on for generations. My community, they have normalized this and accepted it as being normal behavior, and this is what happens in the hood. Which is completely unacceptable, because there are millions of us who come from the supposed hood, all right, who are live under the same conditions and face the same struggles and hardships, not just Black and brown communities, but white communities as well. Okay, and there are millions of us who don't fall into or resort to committing crime. All right, we work, we pay taxes, we are law-abiding, decent citizens. All right, millions of us. So people who participate in criminal behavior, it's a choice. It's a choice that they make. So in terms of the last election, yes, I threw my 100% support behind Lee Zeldin, because Lee Zeldin is a man with great integrity and great honor and great respect. And he was sincere in what he said. And he really had a message that translated with people in the Black and brown community. All right. And for a Republican, that is something that we have not seen in decades. You have Rudy Giuliani, who was able to do it. You had George Pataki, who was able to do it. And I think years and years ago, there was a mayor back in the 70s. He was also a Republican, where he went into, places like Harlem when they had Harlem Week, and he stood on a podium and he spoke to hundreds of thousands of African Americans, and they loved him. You know why? Because he was able to articulate a message and an agenda that he had for our community. And he was not afraid of the people. He didn't think he was better than the people. And he just connected with them. And it takes a certain genius, all right? It takes a certain charisma to be able to do that. All right. And Lee Zeldin has that. He has that thing about him. It's something that you don't see very often, right? Maybe because it's his own military experience, his experience in the military, and being a commander and not judging people by who they are, where they're from, just a camaraderie type of thing. But he has that thing about him. And there are thousands of us, all right, who heard Lee's message, and we threw our support behind him. Now, I am a 40-year Democrat, all right, and it wasn't until this last election season that I actually changed to conservative, all right. Now, I'm from a Republican household. My mother's Republican, my father, my grandparents, and most African Americans back in the 50s and the 60s were Republican. All right. I don't know where along the line we lost, that political affiliation and turned into Democrats, but those seeds, those Republican seeds, those conservative values were planted in us from children. We believe in God, we believe in family, and we believe in country. All right. Every last single male in my family, dating back to the Buffalo Soldiers, has served in the United States military, including my own two sons. So yes, New York especially is going to continue on a downward spiral, because it's unfortunate that people didn't come out and support Lee more, all right, and help get him across that finish line. Because we need right now a governor like Lee Zeldin and the administration that he would have, put in place in Albany. He would have cleaned that thing from top to bottom. Nobody is perfect. I'm not saying that. Everybody has their own thing. But right now, what we need in this city, all right, is for somebody to come in there and take the bull by the horns and really just go in there and crack the whip and clean house, roll back all these failed policies, right? Start over from scratch, put things in place that are really going to help the offender, like some real initiatives, educational, employment opportunities. And for those that have drug and alcohol problems like Pataki had when he was in office in the 90s, those long-term inpatient drug programs, those drug rehab programs, they work. I'm a product of one. All right. And I went in during the time when Pataki, it was because Pataki saved my life. All right. And I have no area with sharing that part of my story. Back in the 90s during the crack era, Pataki had those alternatives to incarcerations, the mandates. If you were committing crime because of drug and alcohol, you were mandated to a long-term inpatient program, and hundreds of thousands of us, all right, were saved. Our lives were saved. Now you have these open air drug, they have illegal shooting galleries where they're giving out free needles and free crack pipes, and people are just getting high on the street. Now they legalize marijuana, and they have legalized marijuana dispensaries. The war on drugs that's getting ready to happen, the crack war, is not going to have anything on this, all right, because it's legalized now, all right, and it's going to cause all kinds of problems on the ground in the community, right, because a lot of people sell marijuana to support their families, all right, and now they're going to be cut out. It's going to be illegal for them to do that, all right, and all that business is going to be driven to the legal dispensaries, and it's a whole lifestyle. It's a whole thing that's getting ready to happen with that marijuana, and I know for a fact that marijuana is a gateway drug. My first joint, I was 12 years old, all right, and that led me to eventually smoking crack. Okay, so it's progressive, and it gets progressively worse. And this stuff is open and accessible to kids. I don't care how much they try to say that it's not, but it's easily accessible. All right, and we focus too much on guns. All right, a gun is an inanimate object. All right, a gun is completely useless without the mindset behind the trigger. All right, it has to take a person with the intent to point that gun and shoot someone for it to actually be effective. Guns are not the only thing that is killing people. All right, actually, guns are a very small percentage here in New York. There are more stabbings that happen here in New York than shootings. So why there's so much emphasis and focus on guns and completely ignoring all the other homicide victims that were killed by other means, like my son was stabbed to death, and that brings me to talking about how I even got into this. It wasn't intentional. It wasn't on purpose. It was due to some very, very tragic and unfortunate circumstances. My son, Sergeant Hassan Korea, he is a combat Afghanistan war retired veteran. He was stabbed to death in 2018 in Harlem by 4 people he didn't know, nor had he done any harm. And these people are 2 brothers and sister and their friend. All right. They were all apprehended, but because of these new policies and because of the new district attorney who is in office now, Alvin Bragg, I personally voted for Thomas Kenneth. Right, Tom Kenneth was running against Bragg. All right, and Bragg actually squeaked by due to lack of voting. People just didn't come out because they don't pay attention to elections like district attorney. So he squeaked by. But anyway, he's been a complete disaster and a complete failure in his refusal to prosecute crime, including murder, and downgrade, to lesser included offenses. There are hundreds and thousands of mothers just like me, not just in New York, but all across the country, who all we want is justice for the murder of our son or our child. When they do make an arrest, because that's a rare, occasion as well, because I know personally there are many, many mothers who no arrests have been made and the cases have gone completely cold and they're left without any justice or anything, and sometimes they're better off, because me being thrown into this situation, I've been fighting for justice for my son in Manhattan Criminal Court for 4 years. Right, for 4 years, going back and forth to court, drugged back and forth. I never missed a court date, and they have completely disregarded, disrespected. They consider my son to be a fictitious character. The most important person in that courtroom are the people who killed him. We have no rights. Victims have no rights. We have no voice. So that's why I stood up. Right. And that's why I demanded that they hear me, whether they liked it or not, and I would stand outside many, many days in the snow and the rain. It didn't matter, in the boiling heat with a sign in the bullhorn by myself, and just walk up and down in front of the courthouse, just screaming at the top of my lungs, no bail, murderers, no bail, stay in jail, take a life, do life, and it began to attract attention. So people started following the case. First it was New York Post, all right, who picked up on it. Then it was Fox News who picked up on it. Then the elections started to come around, all right, and it was the Giulianis who picked up on it, Andrew and Rudy. They had me on the shows. John Katzimatidis had me on his show. Steve Bannon had me on his show, and so it started to resonate with people, so 360, here we are today. All right. 2 of the people who participated in the murder of my son, Alvin Bragg, just blatantly, without regard, completely dismissed murder charges against both of them. Murder and gang assault. Entire homicide is captured on video, so there's no, mistaken identity or no disputing the facts of the case and what they did. But he sentenced the female, the sister, Mary Saunders, to 1 year time served, and charged her with assault with a shoe. Now, I have some people doing some research, some students from LaGuardia College, some criminal law, students, doing research, doing some shepherdizing and different things, seeing if they can find any case law where assault with a shoe is even a crime. Okay, so so far we're not coming up with anything. It looks like it's a charge that Alvin Bragg just pulled out of his behind. All right, pulled out of thin air. All right, and there my son lays in a grave where this woman chased him from trying to escape and also held him while her brother plunged a butcher knife into his body 4 to 6 inches deep 9 times. All right, and ran and left him and his father's body in the street for dead. Okay, so she's home with her family, she's been home for about 2 years now. And also another defendant, Travis Stewart, who has one prior violent felony. They gave him 7 years for attempted gang assault. So the two brothers, James and Christopher Saunders, they are repeat predicate violent felony offenders. These two homicidal maniacs had no business even being out of jail from the begin with. Christopher was actually on parole for attempted murder on a police officer. He had not even been out for 2 years before he participated in that murder of my son. James is the one with the knife. And he was supposed to be sentenced yesterday because he avoided trial, and he pled guilty to the murder and the gang assault. And the judge, once again, for his guilty plea, gave him a plea deal of 20 to life, where both of these homicidal savages, should be in a cage for the rest of their natural lives, all right, to protect the community from such, brutality. Because if they survive for the 20 years, right, and they do get out on parole, 10 chances to 1, right, they will get out and they will do the same thing over again, and that's just statistical. That's just, go ahead.
Madeline, first off, I want to express our sorrow at your loss, your family's loss. And I want to once again commend you for speaking up. And yesterday, the governor of New York, Hochul, once again made this statement that bail reform, which protects the criminal, does not lead to more crimes. Now, it makes no sense. And the reason why I want to go down this, I want to discuss in greater detail this particular point, is that this type of reasoning has been used by elected officials across the country for having lax crime programs, of going after criminals, making them actually punish them for doing what they did. What would you say if Governor Hochul was here to her comment that in fact the bail laws that release criminals is not the problem? What do you have to say about that?
Well, I would say I wouldn't even call her governor. I would just call her Kathy. Okay. Kathy, right? She needs to come out of denial. Okay. And she needs to, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. She says the same thing over and over again, expecting the reality to just magically disappear just because she says it, okay? Now, she is a database person. When you don't have prosecutors that are prosecuting crime, okay? When you have prosecutors that are downgrading violent felony offenses, including murder, to lesser included offenses, of course, murder rates are going to go down. Of course, arrest rates are going to go down. It's just called manipulating the data. And it's not because anything in that bail reform or any of those policies is actually being effective, because we have yet to see any measurable outcomes of effectiveness for any of it. All right. We do see the measurable outcomes of ineffectiveness, but we don't see any measurable outcomes of effectiveness. They can manipulate, they can twist, they can, throw all the shade that they want. Right? But the actual boots on the ground, the people in the trenches, all right, the mothers who are going to the morgue to identify bodies, who are standing by their child's bedside, praying and crying that they pulled through the night, because they've been shot or stabbed. We know, all right, that these policies have done nothing but create this environment of lawlessness, all right? It gives, especially our young people, the red light to do and think and feel whatever they want with no consequences. What it's doing in all actuality is creating a whole new generation of career criminals and mass incarceration. It's what it's doing, because our young people are racking up charge after charge after charge. At some point, all right, those charges are going to escalate. The more they get away with it, the worse crimes they're going to do the next time, and eventually they're going to end up killing somebody, or somebody's going to end up killing them, right? And I personally feel that that's the purpose, that's the intention, all right, to get rid of them or let them self-decimate, all right, because that's what those policies have done. It's done nothing to assist, excuse me, to assist our community or to improve the quality of life of where we live. It does absolutely nothing.
Well, needless to say that law-abiding citizens, not politicians, would agree with every word that you've said. Once again, I want to congratulate you, because it's so important for citizens, for victims of crime, to stand up and say, we have to put an end to this madness.
Yes.
And I want to thank you for coming here, sharing both your personal experiences and your depiction of these elected officials and Alvin Bragg not prosecuting violent criminals, murderers, rapists, in fact, is committing a criminal act against law-abiding citizens.
Absolutely.
And we, the Code Red podcast, is broadcast on behalf of an organization called Secure America Now. And we are carrying this particular message of the need to have serious law-abiding societies and elected officials who uphold the law and prosecute when need to prosecute. And this podcast will be disseminated nationwide. And we will continue to highlight experiences like yours, but also your advocacy, which I think is commendable beyond the norm.
Thank you.
Because if people are quiet, whether it's if they don't vote when they can, to vote for Lee Zeldin, to vote for the opponent of Alvin Bragg, then shame on them. We have to get mobilized. And the reason why we were thrilled that you were going to come on to the podcast is because you're a living example of how Americans should, in fact, be reacting to what is going on in our society. So, Madeline, it's been a pleasure to meet you. Thank you for coming on. And I look forward to continuing to highlight the work that you're doing and other advocates are doing. Thank you, Matt.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for listening to Code Red with Secure America Now. We are the largest national security digital platform in the nation, dedicated to bringing critical security issues to the forefront of the American debate. For more information, visit our website at www.secureamericanow.org.